Hello and welcome to another episode of Your Life Simplified. My name is Scott Sturgeon. On today's episode, we are going to take a deep dive into the job search, the job hunt, the career redefining, whatever you want to phrase it. That is really the point and the focus of today's episode. And we really felt like this would be a timely topic, just given where we are economically with a whole heap of uncertainty. And on top of that, a lot of individuals affected by the pandemic, whether they're laid off, furloughed, or even just looking to make a career change or look for a new position or role. A lot of the traditional channels that individuals have looked at to seek out careers, as if it wasn't challenging and intimidating enough already, now they're having to kind of reinvent a lot of things as they kind of go along. So our guest today, to help us unpack some of this discussion and really kind of provide some knowledge, is Karen Fenaroli, CEO and founder of Fenaroli and Associates. Karen's firm specializes in talent acquisition for board placements, C-suite executives, and vice presidents, search assignments in a variety of growing commercial and industrial companies throughout the United States. Karen, thank you so much for taking time to come on the show.
Scott, thanks for inviting me. This is a fabulous topic, and I applaud Mariner for just putting it out there and asking for some vulnerability and advice.
Absolutely. And what better place to go than someone like yourself who has conceivably decades of industry knowledge in helping executives and individuals search out new careers. So kind of in that same vein or just in that light, Karen, do you want to kind of give a background on maybe on yourself and kind of your firm?
Absolutely. Prior to this, I was a CEO of a manufacturing company that was a global apparel company and was the president of the industry that I represented in New York City. So having about 15 years of that experience, and then prior to that at two global brands, one called Coca-Cola, where I was in the M&A shop, really buying and selling companies, and then KPMG, where I was evaluating companies to buy and sell. But thanks for asking for that introduction. I've now been a headhunter and the CEO of this firm for over 15 years. So we've got a quality client base in the United States.
Absolutely. So I think kind of with that in mind, you mentioned there's widespread issues as it pertains to this, especially kind of in our economic climate. Do you want to kind of give just a commentary on where you see the job market currently or kind of the status in a little bit of a nutshell?
Well, for certain sectors of the economy, it's a complete washout. And that's important to upfront say. When you've got almost 25 plus million people looking for jobs, everyone that's listening to this has a family member or someone in their neighborhood or a friend in that bucket. So the ecosystems that are being affected, when you think about travel, airlines, hospitality, maybe potentially bleeding over into real estate, sports, events, and consumer food. So the 25 plus million people are in that category, and everyone wants to know, how do you have an effective job search?
Absolutely. It's wild to me. You mentioned all the industries affected, and it's like going back 6 months. How could you possibly have listed all of those, to be so crippled or massively impacted is probably a better way of phrasing it here in the present day. So glad to, I think kind of good status of where we are, but for those impacted who are affected, as they look to where they're going, when you look at the job seekers that you have met with or work with or interact with and the firms that you represent, what do you think are some of the better, I hate to say habits, but characteristics or things like that you see that allow for success in the search process?
So I boil this down to three. First, it is mental health. And mental health involves having a discipline in your life, regardless of how you feel. We have to get up. We got to make our bed. We have to be kind. We have to be civic. You have to be the human being you were before the pandemic. I mean, that's got to still be with you. So the mental health is key, and the discipline is key. Getting dressed, taking a shower, making your bed, and actually opening up something that makes you feel like you're still working. Because what you want to avoid is atrophy. You want to avoid going back. I mean, think about when your kids are out for summer break. It's the same thing. We have now been here for 11 weeks. And I believe the best job seekers are still in a discipline of if I called them up and said, how are you doing this week? They'd say, I'm working my pipeline. So that would be the second big quality that you need to put on your job seeker best habits, which is coming up with the companies you want to work for, regardless of if they have an opportunity. And that's really au contraire to what most people think. Oh, I'm waiting for a job opportunity. Magically, I'm going to get this email ping into my inbox from a headhunter like me that asks, hey, would you like to apply for this? Well, those days are gone because we are so busy. We've kind of shut off some of that job seeker faucet. So what I'd say is my second big quality of good is come up with the company list that you want to work for. And that is go into your city and say, I admire these companies, notwithstanding a job opportunity, and make an Excel spreadsheet. I'd even make it into a Google Sheets, which will then make you think about how you send a Google Sheets to your friends, because what you do need to do for the third suggestion is cross over to the database. You need to come up with your own personal lifeline database. And these are probably 20 people that you trust the most and can be super vulnerable with and say, I need help with my job search. Now, my recommendation is 18 out of those 20 people have a job. Because if you're networking with other job seekers, that is going to be very depressing. Don't do that. No. So I'd come up with a friend group. I'd network with them individually. I think that having 5 to 7 quality phone calls with your lifeline per week is the cadence. So I've given you 3 suggestions. 1, mental health, family health, telling your husband and wife that you love them despite not having a job, or your friends and family, being healthy, working out, having a discipline. 2nd, coming up with a hardcore list of these are my targets. And then 3rd, working your database. And if you don't have one, now's the time to get out a blank Excel and just say, these are the people that are going to help me with reality. What you want your friends to tell you is the truth. We don't want to sugarcoat this. You want your friends to tell you, my resume sucks. By the way, you could be a little less aggressive. I mean, all of these comments that up to this point, maybe you've been too busy being a fancy job person, that now you're a job seeker and you're feeling totally on the other side of the looking glass.
All outstanding points. Complacency to me seems like one of the big ones. And it's the opposite of discipline, right?
Yeah.
The ability to get up every day. I read somewhere, everyone's working from home. It's important to just get up. And I had a friend text me a while back saying, do you actually put on pants or is it just gym shorts all day? And I was like, no, it's important, I think, to put on maybe not even a collared shirt every day, but at least, kind of get the process going. Doesn't necessarily have to be exactly what it was before, but continuing that over, as in our current time frame, and the same stays true for those seeking employment. It is so much about just kind of pounding the pavement as you normally do, even though things are just a little bit different. Karen, I think in general, those are all great points. If there was one kind of overarching theme, and I think it's going to differ slightly on what the role is, whether someone was furloughed, they were let go, or they're looking for a new role, but they have an existing position. Do you have general points of advice for maybe each of those 3 different scenarios?
So furloughed, you are technically still available for rehire with your company. So being furloughed is you better have your head in the game, because that company reserves the right to rehire you quickly. And I would be working on my own skills during that time. There's a lot of, for instance, Yale's doing, the meaning of happiness. All of these Coursera classes are free. I would keep up my mental energy and take 1 or 2 of those classes during furlough. I would absolutely have my Zoom coffee list. Zoom is pretty inexpensive and it's worth the money just to see people. And again, getting back to habits of furlough, you need to put on pants. It is important. It is important to be hydrated. For me, during furlough, what I would also do is I'd buy a stand-up desk. I think it's important to stand up, sit down, kind of variable it. And I'd stay connected to your industry community. Yesterday, I received a furloughed request from someone I knew that I'd been headhunting. And he said, I've been furloughed. Would you take a call from me? The very first thing I asked as a headhunter is, give me 2 things you're doing during furlough. I mean, I asked him that exact question. And he said, well, first of all, I'm talking to you because I know you know exactly what's going on. I said, you're right. We are creating the jobs market with every phone call. He said, what's going on? And I just exchanged information with him. The second thing that furloughed executives need to do is realize they're going to come back, because they will. And I'm betting on that crowd. Okay. The next spectrum you asked for is just flat out released. 2 bits of advice. Get rid of your anger and move on immediately, because just like a sensor, recruiters can sense if you have a chip on your shoulder. And if that's there, I don't have the time to deal with a chip. I've only closed 1 interview where we stopped the interview. There was a chip on this person's shoulder. And I said, I don't have time to coach you. You got to realize you're done. Here you are. You need to be pointed this way. And that mental energy, you got to own that. You're done. Just turn the page. So I would say to people that have been fired or terminated, immediately get your great attitude back. The second thing I would do is I would scrap your old resume. Just scrap it. Don't start from your old resume. Get out a brand new piece of paper, put your name on the top, put 10 words of vision and your last 3 jobs, and build a resume that is a 1-pager from ground up. It is such an invigorating activity to build something new versus rehabbing like the old piece of you-know-what that you hung on to. So I'd say job seekers need a new attitude. They need a new resume. And now getting onto the third category, which is, hey, I think I'm going to look for a new job, even though I have a job. Go back to step 1, which is update your resume immediately. I have a lot of job seekers that are passive. They're passive candidates. And they say, hey, I'm going to update my resume. Then I say, why did you call me? Because right now you've told me you haven't done your homework. Okay. I just gave you 15 minutes on my calendar, which is about all any headhunter will accommodate right now. But your resume isn't updated. By the way, your LinkedIn looks like you went, you still are in, MBA school. And that's 10 years ago. So make sure your social media, you've done a social media audit, and your Facebook looks good. You don't have any Instagram weirdo things hanging out, and you've got some kind of civic activity. My mentor said to me when I founded my company 4 years ago, you're still a job seeker. You're founding a new company. And this person, he said to me, so now you're a job seeker. I expect you to be a citizen. Okay. What are you doing civically? Because being civic matters the most. And he said, who do you want to be? And I was like, you're right. What am I going to do? So this is the time as a job seeker to make sure that you're polishing up your civic engagement. Good headhunters are going to ask the question, what have you done for us lately? And it can't be just the company you work for. It's got to be you.
Makes total sense. In listening to you very accurately and eloquently state all of that, I think the biggest takeaway I had was you're looking for almost a reinvention of yourself. You're basically looking at things you've done in the past that were tailored to whatever that job or that career was, but you're reimagining that and really marketing yourself, moving forward for whatever endeavor you're looking to pursue. I guess the question from there, maybe not specific to seekers in general, but within the economy overall, do you see opportunities for those seeking new roles that they might have during this time that maybe didn't exist before or something of that nature?
So for the next 9 months, what we're going to need the most of is creativity. And we keep hearing that over and over again. And the way that you demonstrate that you can be the best candidate on a slate or the best job seeker or the best executive is to do exactly what you've done, Scott. And that's take a platform of relationships and you flipped it to an audio show, a visual show, an informational expertise platform. You've already done it. So check plus, you've done it yourself. I'd ask every executive listening to this to find a way to take their platform and push it 10% to engage more. Because if you can demonstrate you've done that, you're going to be the 10% that wins more. And that's a question that really is part of what you're asking me is, who am I betting on? I'm only betting on about 30% of the people that are working right now, because you have to be braver, you have to be more creative, you have to be more daring, and you have to be more entrepreneurial in your own career. And that's going to cause a little scratch on your reputation occasionally, because you're going to have to go and run something up the flagpole and say, hey, I want to do this because it would flip my platform a little bit, but I know I've got to get a permission to do that from my current employer. You've got to do those things to progress your company.
Karen, when I think about a lot of the things you've talked about, I kind of want to get into, I guess I'll just phrase it as logistics. Typically, I think when I was several years ago looking for a new role, part of that process was reaching out to people through my network, through my database, setting up coffee meetings. I think typically was what I like to do, just because I think that from my perspective, always in-person meetings, kind of selling yourself, selling who you are, is better done face-to-face. And so now we're in an environment where that is generally frowned upon and generally maybe not safe even to do in certain instances. So whether it comes to resumes or Zoom meetings or, reaching out to contacts you have or people you don't really know but would like to get to know, what are the logistics of networking and job hunting now as opposed to 6 months ago or even 6 months forward from now?
Yeah. So I would go back to your database of 20 that we've talked about, and I'd say, some of those people you may know well, and some will be an extension of that network, I would come up with 10 people that you don't know that you want to know. And let me give you an idea. I'll give you an example. Jeremy at the Federal Reserve, I wanted to get to know him, but I knew he had an admired project, which is solving the digital divide in Kansas City. And they're trying to collect something like 9,000 laptops. So what I did was, I want to be of mutual benefit to the whole city. So I asked him I complimented him on LinkedIn. I said, hey, dude, I love what you're doing. I think it's Jeremy Hagel. I said, I love what you're doing. Could you grab a Zoom with me? And again, I wanted to get to know him, but really for mutual benefit. So I think that's the key, is job seekers need to get to know people. And the number is about 100 new people to get their networks out there and build farther. So on the Zoom call, I brought two of my other friends. Jeremy had never met these people, but I knew that Greg Elliott, who was on the Tech Council of Kansas City, and he's a techie, I knew that he knows where those laptops are. I said, hey, Greg, you're looking for your next role and I want to help you. Would you get on this call with me? Because this is the Fed and I want to help Jeremy. And he's like, are you kidding me? I'd love to get on that call. So that's an example of helping Greg by helping the Fed, by helping the city, having the bravery to just say, let's just grab a call to idea generate. Let's just grab some ideas on mutual benefit. I had a former boss that was so frowned upon that. Mutual benefit, what does that mean? I said, it's all about helping each other. That's what this whole job seeker thing is. I want to see that you're a thriving citizen in my city. Let me just help you out here. So that's one idea, is to get a 3-way or 4-way going, because I do think the one-on-one with a cold new friend is really hard.
Sure.
You're like putting out your hand. Hello. How are you? Let me shake virtually. That looks weird.
Maybe avoid that.
So the other thing that job seekers can do in this period where it is really difficult to take a cold relationship and move it to a warm one, I would find a couple of webinars or Zoominars, and I get on the call. I just take a risk. I'd look at some of the Eventbrite things that are going on around the city that they live in and just participate. You can scroll and look at some of the attendees. You can reach out to them in the Q&A chat box, and it isn't creepy. You can just say, hey, I really enjoyed listening to a couple of the things you shared. would love to grab a Zoom call with you, and feel free to bring someone else. We're going to get through this. We must be brave.
Bravery is key. I couldn't agree more. It's just kind of putting yourself out there, at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
And there's angst, involved in that. I think that some people probably feel it more than others. And some people are more, Karen, I would probably put you in the party of saying you're very naturally versed in being very comfortable reaching out to people, which is a very powerful trait to have. But you're right. Even if you're not, it's something that I think can be learned, or if not,
Mm-hmm.
you can kind of work your way through it and get better at it over time. But the first step is just doing it. And so taking that proactive approach, I think is very smart.
Thanks again for downloading this episode of Your Life Simplified, which is produced by Mariner Wealth Advisors. And at Mariner Wealth Advisors, we're here to serve as your advocate. We help people chart a course to reach their personal and financial goals so that they can have greater peace of mind that may lead to a more fulfilling life. We do this by always putting our clients first. Because as fiduciaries, we're required to provide guidance that's in the best interest of clients, not in the best interest of a company or shareholders or anyone else. So as you listen to this podcast and have questions about maybe your own financial situation, or would simply like a second opinion, or even you have an idea for a future podcast, please go ahead and email us at podcast@marinerwealthadvisors.com. If you found the information on this podcast valuable, please go ahead and share it with a friend or family member that you think might benefit from this information. And please don't forget to subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss an episode. Thanks for listening, and now back to the episode.
One of the questions I also wanted to touch on, we'll kind of segue just a little bit. And we kind of touched on some successful habits and traits that you see in whether it's executives you work with or job hunters or so on and so forth. But you have this program called the Executive Ascent, and it gets into some of the habits or training really for executives that you work with. Do you want to maybe kind of touch a little bit about what the Executive Ascent is all about, and kind of how that plays into the clients that you work with?
Absolutely. Was very honored that Mariner is a consistent participant in that program. And as a consulting company, over 10 years of granularly looking at the talent gaps and how people succeed more and cross the line, and then who stays right at the line. Like, you always come in second or third, but you're never first, right? So we came up with a list of 18 things that I think have always been dividing the ultra success from the success. And I'll rattle off a few topics. One is admitting failure. Second, seeking feedback. Third, just being accountable, being more innovative, being more resilient, asking for performance coaching from your boss. Like, where do you see me not succeeding at 100% when I really want to succeed at 110? Another topic is culture. I mean, culture is everything. How to curate it, how to kill it, transitioning to new roles, and then even how to be a board candidate, how to be a nonprofit board candidate. And the program is 24 hours. It is a curation of 24 people we are watching to get that next huge promotion at their company. And we put them together. It's a program that lasts 3 months. So it's 3 mornings. And we just teach leadership hour to hour to hour to hour, back to back to back. Now, interestingly, in COVID, in this pandemic, we can't do that in person, right?
Sure.
So we knew it was happening. Our first cohort was going to meet in March. We took the whole class in about 3 hours, all virtual. And instead of interviewing local CEOs, it took the national CEOs and we just put them in. So our first presenter was Helena Verellen. Helena runs a small little company called Audible Books. And she talked about what it meant for her to open up the whole curriculum free to every child in the world on this Audible Books platform. We brought in Judith Irwin, who is the CEO and founder of a bank called Grasshopper Bank. It is the first online bank out of New York City. We had Toby Rush, who's been very successful with iVerify and Zolo. So we've really brought in CEOs to teach the leaders. And I love it because it's a giving platform. And now we're in our second, marketing our third cohort in the fall. And a very famous author named Jerry Colonna came to speak with us. He wrote a book called Reboot. And the premise of the book is, why did you get here? And why are you still here as an executive? And if you can answer that question and start telling that story, so that's what this executive ascent gets us all to do, is to go, all right, my name is Scott Sturgeon, and I am here because of this impactful crossroads.
Right.
So yeah, I love the program. It's an honor to be founding it. Christine Murray and I run it.
That's very cool. I guess it directly leads into my next question. I think in general is, when you look at your firm, the growth and success that you've had, are a lot of the traits and, kind of that process that you use for working with clients, does that borrow from the program topics that you're working through in Executive Ascent, or is it just kind of a proprietary process, if you will, that's wholly separate?
Great question. I mean, that's probably the capstone question of this interview, which is, what makes a leader, really? And can leadership be taught? And when you're interviewing, can you figure out who the leaders are? So for us, there's no proprietary nature of this. After 10,000 interviews in the last 15 years, I can tell you how I feel. There's 5 words. Having vision is one. You have to know where you're going to go 6 months, a year from now, 2 years from now in your career. Second, you engage. So when I think about being engaging, that means talking with simple words. Third thing about being a leader and us finding one is, you have to make decisions. It's either you make the decision with 90% of the information, or you just sputter out and you're like analysis paralysis. Everyone likes to follow the decision maker.
Right.
Okay. The fourth and fifth are, you must be ethical. I need to know that you are real and truthful and believable, and you're honest, and your compass is pointed in the right direction. And the final thing, and this is probably the most important thing, I think you need to think like Albert Einstein all the time. We need to be creative in our sleep. We need to be dreaming of solutions, because 9 months from now, we're going to be somewhere. And I want to be with my friends that are being creative and we're idea generating. So those are my 5: vision, engagement, decision making, being ethical, and then finally being just super creative.
Do you think there are certain individuals who are more prone to having those traits naturally, or do you think that there's something that can be, whether it's developed or grown or created over time?
It's important to work with a coach. And if you can, that's the reason why we did this Executive Ascent. It was an inexpensive way to leverage a cohort and 24 CEOs to coach each other, and at least to be self-aware. You've asked the question, can you, if you don't have these things naturally, can you grow them? You just need to be aware of them. I put on my calendar every day for a year, those 5 words. And after a year, I pretty much said, I got it. I need to talk less. I need to vision more. I need to make decisions quicker. So I would say, yes, Scott, you can learn them. I believe that talent can transcend. You just have to coach yourself, and you probably need to get an accountability partner. A lot of people are just in denial. The narcissists and the unaccountable people don't listen to this show because they're never going to get it. But the ones that really, really want to be vulnerable and get a coach, even if it's just a once a month check-in, do it. Everybody can get a little bit better.
It's interesting. I mean, I have to think probably the first step in that is admitting that you can't do it all, that you don't know it all. And probably one of the traits even of just recognizing weaknesses within yourself that could be worked on has to be key. It's like working a muscle or playing golf or...
Serena Williams has at minimum 6 to 7 coaches. She's the best. Be like Serena. Yeah.
You're exactly right. Karen, I want to switch gears a little bit. One of the things I wanted to touch on was for you, obviously the experience that you have, your ear to the ground on all things job search, career redefinement, whatever the case may be. If you look into your crystal ball, what do you see for the future of job seeking in the U.S. and what have you done to really kind of expand talent?
Well, I'm not the chief economist of the United States, but I will certainly assume the mantle of the chief job economist right now. And I'll give you two things that I'm doing and what I'm doing to expand talent. We are more than likely going to offer a piece of this executive Ascent out there just free to the whole United States, a little tiny bit of it, because we need to. I mean, if I could help 500,000 people with just a little soundbite, I would clearly do that. My outlook to expand the opportunities are this. Everybody has the chance to expand their technology muscle. We must do it. Every company needs to double down on some training for technology-enabled work. So I'd ask every CEO that's listening, I'd ask every COO, every head of HR, every chief investment officer to say how I can make more value out of my company is learning from this pandemic and taking some of these great things we're doing and not saying no to it once we are going to be together. We even declared a company holiday this Friday. Amazon did. They said, we are so fatigued. We're working 24/7, just thinking about work. I think we're going to declare a monthly holiday every month until we get back to work fully because we need more mental health. So that's one thing. We've got to leverage technology. And if we advance our craft, it opens up more job opportunities because people self-learn, they self-taught. So I think it's technology. I think it's your own attitude. I think it's a tone at the top. Companies will not be returning to work as normal because now we've been working virtually and actually it's better. We just got to come somewhere in between.
I think you're right. It has been interesting to see the dynamics between how organizations are dealing with this whole process. And I'll just add, if the executive Ascent is, if you end up doing something with that to the public, we'd be happy to provide that, a link to that on our site as well, MarinerWealthAdvisors.com.
Thank you.
Karen, all fantastic points. But I know we've gone a little bit long on time, but it's all been such really great information. I think we have maybe 2 or 3 more questions. And one of the big ones I wanted to make sure that we hit before we ended, 2020 compensation expectations, and even into 2021 or beyond. But for you, for 2020, in terms of compensation or bonuses or options or what have you, what are the kinds of expectations that you think execs should have as they're kind of looking at that end of the business?
So I will put it into 2 buckets. One, if you're a job seeker or you're on furlough, there is a leverage point that you don't have in the marketplace because you don't have a current role. So there will be some scratch, as they say in golf, that you will take on your compensation when you re-enter the workforce, and you need to be honest about that. I think it's probably a 10% dip, at minimum, 10% dip. For bonuses this year, I think that there's a chance they could easily be 0. And you're living on base, and we were right there in 2008. So hear it now. I've said it. We're lucky to be employed. And then the second bucket is the A players, A+, A players, those 30% that are really driving the business, driving the revenue. And those are players that, notwithstanding any pandemic, they are still going to be A+ players. Mm-hmm. So what I'm seeing is, and I just got an email this morning, would I look at an individual compensation plan for one person that's the jewel, that ascending leader, and could I look at a 3-year compensation for that particular person? What did I think about stock options? What did I think about long-term? What were any other bennies that I could recommend? What about short-term? Should the base be recalibrated? Now, for us to make those comments, we really need to have the experience. So I just went back to 10 to 12 other searches I'd done. I looked at about 100 people's compensation. But the compensation is important. So there's the furlough and the terminator and the job seeker that I think is going to take some scratch, probably for 18 months. But yet there's these top performers. They're going to prevail notwithstanding.
Interesting. I mean, I think at the end of the day, when you look at a career, it's a longer term game. Yep. So 18 months, maybe in the grand scheme is not that big of a deal, but interesting points nonetheless. The second question I want to make sure we get, you mentioned being a civic leader, having community involvement, being a real pillar of the things that you're doing, regardless of industry, industry agnostic. What are some things that you're working on to really embody that?
So at Fenaroli as a firm, 5 years ago, we had lunch with two of my favorite firms in the world. The Polsinelli Group, we had lunch with Greg Cradfield and Michael Williamson and Lisa Mitchell from Techstars. And that was a long-awaited, what the heck's going on with the startup community and how can we as a group of friends put together something that would be a funding mechanism. So I shook down all my clients, and with the help of a number of banks, a number of marketing companies like Circle Sideways, a number of CPA firms, we all got individual checks, and we wrote an entry fee of $1,000 a ticket to come to what I think is the longest running pitch rally in the Midwest. It's now its 5th year anniversary. It's called the Pure Pitch Rally. We funded 40 companies. Without the funding of these angel investors, and many of them are your clients, we would not have created and sustained 40 new companies. So we're coming up on the 5th anniversary. It's October 12th, and we will listen to 8 great pitches. And those $1,000 checks will go to 8 people. And you can walk away. And what we're doing is really funding the startup community, because the faucet is off. There's no water for the startup community during a pandemic. And I'm a startup. I just can't have that happen. So thanks for asking. And anyone who wants to be a shark, they can go on to purepitchrally.com and send me a note, and I will gladly offer them a seat next to the other fantastic civic leaders that they will be able to co-fund with.
Outstanding. No, happy to ask it. That's very cool. What better way to support, local small business or some really innovative ideas? That's outstanding. Karen, this has been, I will candidly admit, one of the more enlightening conversations we've had on our podcast. I think you touched on some really great topics, especially kind of given where we are in our economic cycle and so many unknowns. I think you have really hit home the points that there are a lot of things that we can control at the end of the day. It's just a matter of taking the time and being, as you mentioned really well, being brave to make those things happen. So thank you so much. The last question, we always ask at the end of the day, we're a wealth management firm. I think it's important to kind of address this. When you look across your entire career or even your entire life, what do you think is one of the biggest, the biggest financial lesson you have ever learned?
2 things. First, money matters, security matters, and driving to be secure and getting a nut and then taking a risk. So I've learned that money matters and security matters. The second thing I've learned is the most important value in the world is yourself. And you are your own lottery ticket. And the more that you can multiply others and take them into that, you have your security and your money, but really you've got to use your human beingness to take other people in your life with you, your community, your money matters and civic matters. So that would be my financial lesson. If you think it's all about money, it's not all about money.
Could not agree more. Karen, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show.
Scott, thank you so much for having me as a guest. This has been the highlight of my week, and whatever wisdom I've been able to share, let it go forth into the universe and create value.
Karen, thank you so much. Again, for all of our listeners, thank you for taking the time to download, to listen. By all means, if you're listening, go ahead. We can't recommend enough subscribing to Your Life Simplified. And as always, if you have thoughts on future podcasts or suggestions or advice for us as we move forward through this process, we can't encourage you enough to reach out to podcast@marinerwealthadvisors.com. Thanks for tuning in.
Wealth Advisors, or MWA, is an SEC registered investment advisor with its principal place of business in the state of Kansas. Registration of an investment advisor does not imply a certain level of skill or training. MWA is in compliance with the current notice filing requirements imposed upon registered investment advisors by those states in which MWA maintains clients. MWA may only transact business in those states in which it is notice filed or qualifies for an exemption or exclusion from notice filing requirements. Any subsequent direct communication by MWA with a prospective client shall be conducted by a representative that is either registered or qualifies for an exemption or exclusion from registration in the state where the prospective client resides. For additional information about MWA, including fees and services, please contact MWA or refer to the Investment Advisor public disclosure website at www.advisorinfo.sec.gov. Please read the disclosure statement carefully before you invest or send money.